The funeral of Queen Anne Stuart. On the occasion of her death, the Queen left specific instructions for her funeral in her draft of will, expressing her wish to be laid to rest in the same manner and place as her late royal consort. Despite the funeral being officially classified as private, the ceremony was nonetheless a grand affair, with expenses totalling £10,579. The day before the funeral, the Queen's coffin, draped in purple, was transported from Kensington to Westminster in a funeral chariot. This chariot, notable for its large and sturdy wheels, was drawn by 8 robust horses, all adorned in purple hoods to match the somber occasion. The coffin's journey to Westminster was a significant event, drawing the attention of many. Upon arrival at Westminster, the coffin was placed in the Prince's chamber of the Palace of Westminster, where a vigil was held in honour of the deceased monarch. The Duchess of Somerset was appointed as the chief mourner, a role of great honour and responsibility, supported by her husband and another male supporter. The Queen's lady-in-waiting and maids of honour were also present to pay their respects, along with 14 countesses who added to the solemnity and grandeur of the occasion. Each of these women was provided with 26 yards of black crape to fashion mourning veils, adhering to the traditions of the time and marking their participation in the mourning process. The actual burial took place on the evening of the 24th of August, a ceremony steeped in tradition and formality. The Queen's interment was marked by the presence of 100 yeomen of the Guard, who were on duty wearing specifically made black coats. Their presence underscored the significance of the event, as they stood as solemn witnesses to the final rites of their monarch. The service itself was conducted by Francis Atterbury, the Bishop of Rochester, who served as the Dean of Westminster. This choice of officiant was somewhat ironic, given that the Queen had particularly disliked him during her lifetime. Nevertheless, he performed his duties with the gravity and decorum befitting such an occasion. In contrast to her feelings about Atterbury, the Queen might have taken some solace in the music provided by 30 children of the Chapel Royal. These young choristers, dressed in their formal attire, lent their voices to the service, a fitting tribute to a monarch who had held music in high regard. Each child was also equipped with a new pocket handkerchief, a small but thoughtful detail that reflected the attention to ceremony and protocol that characterized the entire funeral. The funeral arrangement extended beyond the immediate royal family and close attendants. Even the Queen's household staff were considered in the preparations, though not all were provided with new mourning garments. A special mourning livery, however, was fashioned for Samuel Stubbs, the Queen's rat killer, highlighting the thoroughness with which the Queen's household was involved in the funeral proceedings. This attention to detail, extending even to the less prominent members of the household, illustrated the comprehensive nature of the funeral planning. One of the more striking aspects of the funeral was the size of the Queen's coffin. Onlookers noted that it was even larger than that of her husband, the Prince, who had been known as a very large and bulky man. The size of the coffin necessitated the involvement of 14 carpenters, all dressed in black coats and caps, to carry it. The burden was indeed a heavy one, both literally and figuratively, as these men bore the weight of the final resting place of a monarch who had reigned during a pivotal period in British history. In addition to the carpenters, 6 dukes served as pallbearers, their role more ceremonial than functional, but equally important in the overall pageantry of the event. The final resting place of the Queen was the Henry VII Chapel in Westminster Abbey, a site of deep historical and spiritual significance. As per her wishes, she was laid to rest on the right-hand side of the chapel next to her beloved husband. This placement symbolised not only their personal bond, but also the unity of their reigns, intertwined in history and now in death. The Queen's coffin was positioned close to those of her children, whose bodies lay in a nearby vault beneath the tomb of their ancestor, Mary Queen of Scots. This proximity to her family in death mirrored the importance of her lineage and the continuation of the Stuart bloodline, albeit one that would soon come to an end with her passing. The Queen's funeral, though designated as private, was an event of considerable public interest and historical importance. The detailed planning, the participation of high-ranking nobles, and the inclusion of even the lesser members of the royal household in the mourning process all reflected the significant role that the Queen had played in the nation's life. Her funeral was not just the end of an individual life, but the closing chapter of the Stuart monarchy. The heavy coffin, the vigil in the Prince's chamber, and the final interment in Westminster Abbey were all steeped in tradition, marking the end of an era. In the broader context, the Queen's funeral can be seen as a reflection of the rituals and customs that surrounded the British monarchy at the time. The emphasis on mourning attire, the involvement of various members of the court, and the careful orchestration of every detail were all part of a long-standing tradition that sought to honour the deceased, while reinforcing the continuity of the monarchy. The fact that her coffin was noted for its size and the presence of the children of the Chapel Royal, among other details, all contributed to the lasting impression of the funeral as a significant historical event. In the end, the Queen was laid to rest according to her wishes, next to her royal consort, surrounded by the symbols of her reign and her family. The final image of the Queen borne to her resting place in a purple draped coffin, attended by the highest-ranking members of her court and her faithful servants, remains a poignant reminder the solemnity and grandeur that characterised the end of the Stuart dynasty.